I was never meant to be the hero of anyone's story, least of all my own. If you asked my father, I was the spare parts kid. His words, not mine. He used to joke about it at barbecues, chuckling over the grill while sipping a Bud Light. One good daughter, one backup, just in case. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Until I learned he meant it. I'm Madison. 31, graphic designer, coffee addict, still checks for monsters under the bed. That last part. That's not a metaphor. Not when you grow up being told that love is conditional and you're only useful when someone else breaks. 3 weeks ago, my father and stepmother tried to force me into a liver transplant for my half-sister Camille. I hadn't spoken to them in over 6 years, not since the incident that sent me into emergency therapy. But when they called out of nowhere, asking to have lunch and reconnect, I was dumb enough to say yes. Because trauma makes you soft in weird places. You crave their approval long after they've proven they'll never give it. The meeting was at their country club in Nashville. That should have been my first clue something was off. The maitre d' looked shocked to see me. "Oh, they said you wouldn't show," he whispered, glancing toward their table. Second clue. Camille was already seated, dressed like a pastel Instagram ad, flawless blowout ivory blouse, not a single trace of the girl who once slammed my fingers in a door and blamed it on my dog. Dad stood and hugged me like he'd just come back from war. My stepmother Deborah air-kissed my cheek like I was a borrowed handbag. And then Camille smiled that same surgical smile I remember from high school when she stole my college essay and won a scholarship for it. "You look healthy," she said. I didn't think much of it until they slid a manila envelope across the table like it was a contract signing in a mafia movie. Inside was a printout from Vanderbilt Medical Center, my name, my liver profile, a note about compatible donor status. I remember blinking, laughing, thinking this was some kind of elaborate prank. What is this?" Dad folded his hands like a preacher. "Camille has stage 4 liver disease. She's on the transplant list, but the wait's too long. You're a match." My brain stopped processing after stage 4. I looked at Camille. She shrugged, not even bothering to fake emotion. Just a blank, expectant stare. Deborah sipped her iced tea. "We didn't want to pressure you over the phone," I scoffed. "So you decided to ambush me over Cobb salad instead?" "Madison," Dad said, voice dropping. "This is about family. She's your sister." "No," I said, standing. "She's your daughter. I was just a bonus prize from a woman you buried so deep you forgot I had her face." Camille didn't flinch. "I would do it for you," she lied. "You once told your friends I should have died with Mom." That got a reaction. Deborah's smile cracked. Dad looked away. I left the club shaking. That night, I sat on my apartment floor with a bottle of red and my cat Luna rereading the medical summary like it might start to make sense. But it never would. My liver wasn't an apology. I ignored their calls, blocked Camille's number, changed my email. But ignoring a monster never stops it from scratching at the walls. A week later, I got a knock at my door. It was Deborah, in pearls, holding a cake box from the bakery near my office. "What do you want?" I asked. "To talk," she said, pushing past me like she owned the air. She set the box down and opened it. "Your favorite, lemon chiffon." I stared at it. "You never once remembered my birthday." She gave a tight smile. "Well, we're trying now. Camille's surgery is scheduled for December. We're hoping you'll come around." I laughed. "You booked surgery without asking me." "We booked it with hope," she said, eyes sharp. "That you'd stop being so bitter." I closed the box and shoved it into her arms. "Get out." She didn't flinch. "You know you weren't supposed to survive the delivery. The doctors told your mother her heart couldn't take it, but she insisted. Said she needed to finish what she started." "What are you saying?" She tilted her head. "I'm saying maybe now you can finish what she started too." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice, how smoothly she made me sound like a thing. An old debt. A spare part. I pulled out the journal I started in therapy years ago. Flipped to the entry marked, "Camille, age 14, the pool incident." The memory returned in full color, how she held my head underwater while Dad watched from his chair, saying I was just being dramatic. The next morning I called Dr. Lang, my primary physician. Hypothetically, I asked, if someone tries to pressure you into a live organ donation, can they? He paused. "Madison, is someone trying to force you?" That's when the words poured out, 7 years of silence undone in a single breath. Dr. Lang scheduled me for a full physical and promised to issue an official note stating I was not a safe donor candidate due to past trauma and psychological risk. He even flagged my file for privacy just in case. I felt safe for about 24 hours, until I got the voicemail. From a number I didn't recognize. My dad's voice. We're filing for temporary medical guardianship. You've been unstable before, Maddie. If you won't help your sister willingly, then maybe the courts can remind you what family really means. And just like that, the monster didn't scratch anymore. It kicked in the door. The voicemail replayed in my head like a siren I couldn't shut off. You've been unstable before, Maddie. If you won't help your sister willingly, maybe the courts can remind you what family really means. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the city buzz beyond my apartment window, while Luna, my cat, curled up against my side, purring like she could soothe me back into safety. But I wasn't safe. Not anymore. Morning came dull and gray. I called Dr. Lang first thing. They're trying to get guardianship, I said, my voice shaking. They think they can force me to donate. There was silence on the line, then his voice calm but firmer than I'd ever heard it. You need a lawyer. Today. I found one. Her name was Alicia Morgan, mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper brain. When I walked into her office, she already had my case file open thanks to Dr. Lang forwarding documentation. She looked at me like a surgeon about to cut out a tumor. I read your file, she said, and I believe you. I didn't know how badly I needed to hear those 4 words until I started crying in her office like a child. She handed me tissues. They're trying to use your past against you. Mental health history, family estrangement, a documented panic episode at age 19. They'll paint it as instability. I nodded. I know. But she continued, her eyes glinting. What they didn't count on is that Tennessee law does not allow medical guardianship of a competent adult unless that adult is proven incapable of informed consent, and your doctor is willing to testify otherwise. So I'm safe. You're safer than they want you to believe. But we need to act fast. By noon, we had filed a cease and desist notice to my father, Deborah, and Camille. Alicia sent it with a formal letter warning of legal retaliation if they proceeded with any claim of guardianship or attempted to alter my medical documentation. But it wasn't over. That evening, a local news blog ran a human interest story titled, "Nashville Family Pleads for Sister's Life as Transplant Window Closes." The photo, Camille in a hospital bed, pale and dramatic. The quote, "I don't blame her. I just hope she finds it in her heart to help." I nearly choked on my tea. They were controlling the narrative, spinning it like I was some selfish, cold-hearted woman denying her dying sister a chance at life. The comment section was full of venom. How could someone say no to their own blood? That woman sounds like a sociopath. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Alicia advised complete radio silence. Let them scream into the void, she said. We'll respond in court, not the comments section. But inside I burned. Because Camille wasn't dying, not like that. Her condition was serious, yes. But she was still attending spa appointments and posting cryptic Instagram stories about fate and sacrifice. And then came the worst of it. I received an envelope via certified mail. Inside, a letter from the family's lawyer. A petition for emergency medical guardianship, signed, notarized, and citing Madison's history of unstable behavior, trauma-induced paranoia, and repeated refusal to act in the best interest of familial well-being. They were trying to say I was mentally unfit to make decisions, that I was endangering my own life by refusing to heal the family. They even included a statement from a doctor, not mine, Camille's transplant specialist. A man who had never spoken to me, never seen my charts, and who dared to suggest that the risks to the donor are manageable. That night I collapsed on the bathroom floor. I cried like I hadn't since my mother died, shaking, retching, clutching the cold tiles as if they could hold me together. Luna meowed outside the door, pawing to get in. Greg, my partner of 3 years, was away on a work trip in Portland. I called him at 1 a.m., voice shredded. They're trying to prove I'm crazy, I whispered. They're trying to steal my body like I'm some kind of meat locker. He went quiet. Then book a ticket. Come stay with me tomorrow. I can't run. You're not running. You're protecting yourself. I wanted to believe that, but something in me felt cornered, like if I left now they'd win, that they'd spin it as guilt or worse, confirmation. So instead I stayed. And I prepared. Alicia began building a legal wall around me. She had Dr. Lang record a video statement affirming my mental capacity. We filed a motion to dismiss their guardianship petition on the basis of medical coercion and misrepresentation. I changed my locks. I alerted building security. I even emailed my employer to explain that I might need a flexible schedule due to family harassment. They were understanding. One of the HR ladies even hugged me after our meeting. I went through something similar, she said, with my brother. Families like that, they'll eat you alive. The next twist came via email from Camille's husband. Subject private, urgent. His message was short, but it shattered the illusion. I had no idea they were pushing this. Camille didn't tell me she already scheduled the surgery, or that you said no. I'm so sorry. I'd like to talk if you're open to it. I don't agree with what they're doing. I stared at the screen. Camille's own husband was defecting. This could change everything. But I didn't know yet whether to trust him, so I clicked reply, and then paused, because I felt it deep in my gut. This wasn't just about my liver anymore. It was about every time they told me I didn't matter. And now, for the first time in my life, I was ready to matter. I hit reply. Fingers trembling, I typed carefully, watching every word like it might explode. Thanks for reaching out. I'm willing to talk on one condition. You come alone. Camille's husband Nathan responded 10 minutes later. Agreed. Tomorrow afternoon, Blackbird Cafe. A safe place, public, neutral, no memories of Deborah's perfume or my father's lecture voice hanging in the walls. Just caffeine and clean light. I barely slept the night before. What did he know? Was he a pawn or a player? Was this a trap or the first crack in their perfect little castle? The next day I sat at a window table with a chamomile tea I didn't touch. My fingers kept tracing the rim of the cup as I scanned every face that walked in. When Nathan finally arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept either button-down shirt, half-wrinkled wedding ring absent. He sat across from me. No handshake, no smile, just tired eyes. I appreciate this, he said quietly. I didn't respond. I want you to know, he began. I had no idea they were trying to file anything against you. I thought, Camille told me you were on board. Willing, scared, but willing. That made me laugh, bitter and sharp. She lied, I said. Surprise. He looked down. I see that now. There was a long silence. She's sick, he said finally. Really sick. I don't want to pretend that isn't real, but the way they're going about this, they're treating me like livestock I finished for him. They already decided my body belonged to them. Now they're just dressing it up in paperwork. Nathan flinched. That's not what I want. Then why stay married to her, I asked. He stared out the window. I've been asking myself that a lot lately. Another beat of silence. Then he reached into his coat pocket and slid something across the table. A folded sheet of paper. Hospital stationery. What is this? Camille's transplant prep documents, he said. You're not the only donor match they found. There's another candidate. Distant cousin on her mom's side, but they rejected her. Why? He looked pained. Because she lives in Nevada. Too far. Too complicated. Too expensive. I unfolded the paper. There it was. Primary match Madison Ray. Secondary match Shelby Quinn. Viable, healthy, same blood type, rejected due to geographic complications. So I whispered I wasn't her only chance. Nathan nodded. But you were the easiest. The one they could reach. The one they could control. Something hot curled in my chest. Anger, sure, but deeper than that. Betrayal wrapped in practicality. I wasn't chosen because I was best. I was chosen because I was nearby and vulnerable. Just like my mom had been. I folded the paper. Thank you for this. It helps. He nodded. I'm not sure what else I can do. I looked him in the eye. You already did it. You confirmed everything I feared. When I got home, Alicia was waiting on Zoom. I showed her the paperwork. Her eyebrows arched. This changes things, she said. This means their entire case, every argument they made about only hope, is fraudulent. So what now? Now she said we go on offense. Over the next week, Alicia compiled everything. Nathan's documents, the public smear campaign, the coercive calls, Deborah's visit, even security cam footage from my apartment lobby showing Camille outside my door at 2 a.m. pacing. We submitted a formal legal rebuttal to their guardianship petition, included in it a countersuit. Emotional distress, attempted medical coercion, invasion of privacy. The next few days were quiet, eerily so. No new voicemails, no email rants, not even cryptic Facebook posts from my aunts. But silence in my family never meant peace. It meant planning. That Sunday, I got a call from my old neighbor, Mrs. Langley, retired teacher 70s, still mows her own lawn. Sweetheart, she said, I thought you should know. Your father and Deborah were here, talking to folks, saying some awful things. My stomach dropped. What kind of things? That you'd fallen back into some breakdown? That you'd been hospitalized for it? That you were refusing to see them out of shame? I closed my eyes, of course. They gave a letter, she added, said it was from your doctor, but it didn't seem right. Looked like it was printed from a Gmail. Fake medical letters now. They were forging statements, lying to neighbors, prepping the stage. I called Alicia. They're making up fake diagnoses. I figured they might, she said. We'll be ready. But I wasn't. Not for what came next. That Tuesday, I got a notification from my health provider's app. New login attempt, denied. I stared at it. My medical portal. Someone had tried to get in. Twice. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just smearing me. They were trying to access my actual records. I called the provider, confirmed it wasn't me. They flagged the account, locked it, and started an investigation. Later that night, I sat on the couch with Luna curled beside me, staring at the blank wall phone clutched in my hand. "They're not going to stop," I whispered. Greg came home early from Portland. He found me like that, motionless, wrapped in a silence thick with fear. "We're going to fix this," he said, kneeling in front of me. "I don't know how," I said. "I feel like they're peeling my life away, one lie at a time." He took my hands. "Then we build a new life, brick by brick, starting with the truth." And that's when I made the decision to go public. Not on Facebook, not some angry post or dramatic video, no, something stronger, verified. I wrote a formal letter, attached my full medical records, my doctor's note, and Nathan's statement. I submitted it to the same local news outlet that ran Camille's story. And then I waited. The next day they published a follow-up. Allegations, surface of medical coercion in Nashville, transplant case. My face wasn't shown, but my words were. And Camille's Perfect Princess Act was officially cracking. But the storm was just beginning. The news article spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, my inbox was a war zone. Some messages were sympathetic strangers thanking me for speaking up for exposing medical coercion in families. Others were vicious. Anonymous accounts accusing me of fabricating everything, of being mentally unstable, of letting my sister wither away because of some ancient grudge. And then there were the emails from relatives. Aunt Marlene called me a drama queen with a persecution complex. Cousin Keith, who I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, suddenly had an opinion: blood is thicker than lawsuits. But one message stood out, short and unsigned. "You don't deserve the family name." I stared at those words for a long time. Not because they hurt, because they didn't, not anymore, but because they confirmed something I'd feared for years. They never saw me as one of them. And now I was finally free to stop pretending. Greg watched me close my laptop, exhale slowly. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I'm clear." That night we took Luna, grabbed takeout, and drove to a lake 30 minutes out of town. It was quiet there, just stars and stillness and the kind of silence that didn't scream at me. We ate in the car, watched the moon shimmer over the water. "I keep thinking about that little girl I used to be," I whispered. "The one who learned to say sorry even when it wasn't her fault, who made herself small to stay safe." Greg looked at me. "You're not her anymore." "I know, but I still grieve for her." He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "That's not weakness, Maddie. That's healing." The next day brought another twist. Alicia called me just after 11 a.m., her voice sharp with disbelief. "They forged your medical records." I froze. "What?" "Camille's fertility clinic just contacted me. Turns out your parents submitted a falsified document, an altered version of your cardiologist's letter. It downplayed your condition, omitted your previous heart surgery. They were trying to present you as a viable surrogate candidate." My skin went cold. That's fraud. Medical fraud, and now it's official. The clinic is filing a report. They have disqualified Camille from further procedures at their facility, permanently. I felt like I was breathing underwater. Every beat of my heart pounded with disbelief, then rage, then relief. "They actually tried to erase my medical history to get what they wanted," I said, almost laughing. "I was right all along." Alicia's voice softened. "You were, and now we have proof." I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. That evening, Camille's husband Nathan called again. His voice was tight, shaken. "I told them I'm done," he said. "I told Camille I couldn't be part of this anymore, that I was contacting an attorney." "What did she say?" "She screamed, said I was choosing you over her, that I was betraying her. Then she locked herself in the bedroom and started messaging the rest of the family, spinning this story about me being manipulated by your lies." I sighed. They never run out of narratives. "That's not all," he said. "She confessed something I didn't want to believe until now." I waited. "She knew," he said. "She knew about your medical history, knew it could kill you, and she told our lawyer not to mention it to the clinic." For a moment I couldn't speak. That wasn't just desperation. That was intent. She knowingly endangered my life to protect her illusion of motherhood. My death was collateral in her fantasy. I finally found my voice. "You should protect yourself, Nathan. They're capable of more than you think." I already did. I filed for divorce this morning. I blinked, stunned. He continued, "It's over. I'm done being their puppet. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't expected anyone from that side to ever break free. But something inside me whispered this matters. This could be the start of accountability. The next week was quiet, no calls, no emails, no fake legal threats, just eerie silence like the calm before a final storm. Then it came, a letter from my father, handwritten, no envelope, just taped to my apartment door, as if we still lived in a world where you could leave notes like that and not have it mean something dangerous. Greg found it first. He opened it, read it once, then handed it to me without a word. It was short. "You always were a disappointment. I gave you life, and you repay me by destroying your sister's chance at one. Don't bother showing your face at the funeral." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it once, twice, and dropped it in the trash. I didn't need to keep that kind of grief anymore. That version of him, controlling, manipulative, always turning love into obligation, it didn't live in me now. It couldn't. But still, a funeral. I checked the local hospital registry. Camille wasn't dead. She wasn't even admitted. The letter was another manipulation, another emotional landmine, and this time I stepped over it. The next morning I met with Alicia. We finalized the cease and desist orders, filed for a restraining order, and at Greg's urging began discussions about legally changing my last name. Not to run, to reclaim. But just as I was starting to feel safe again, another letter arrived. This one from the state court, a formal notice. My parents had filed a civil suit for emotional damages. Their claim, that I had publicly humiliated them, cost them medical opportunity, and irreparably damaged their reputations. My mouth went dry. They weren't just done hurting me. Now they wanted to make me pay. My hands trembled as I stared at the court notice. Not because I feared the lawsuit, but because I knew what it represented. This wasn't about justice. It wasn't even about Camille anymore. This was about control, about making sure even after being exposed they got the last word, that they could twist reality into something where they were the victims. I sat at the kitchen table with Greg, the envelope spread open between us like a surgical incision. "Emotional damages," I said quietly. "From what telling the truth?" Greg looked like he wanted to punch something. "They're counting on the court not caring, on it being easier to blame you than to dig through what they've done. And if I fight it, they just drag me through more hell." He reached over and gently covered my hand with his. "Then we don't fight alone." The next few days blurred together in meetings with Alicia, long strategy calls, document gathering, and witness statements. We built a wall of evidence, each file a brick: Camille's original surrogacy proposal, the doctored medical documents, the fertility clinic's letter of disqualification, Nathan's affidavit. But the most damning piece, a voicemail. Camille had left it weeks earlier, when she was mid-rage spiral, voice tight, high-pitched. "You could have saved me, but you just want me to suffer. You've always been jealous. Don't pretend this is about health. It's punishment. You want me to be childless the way you were loveless." I played it twice before sending it to Alicia. This, she said, is gold. But as the case built, the pressure intensified. One morning I found a letter shoved under our front door. No envelope, just 6 words in thick Sharpie. "You'll regret hurting your blood." No signature, just a smear of ink and a ghost of their old threats. Greg called the police. They opened a file, but without a name or video footage, there wasn't much they could do. I had the locks changed anyway. Added a camera above the porch. Every click of the drill felt like a boundary being reinforced, but no amount of deadbolts could stop the whispers. At the grocery store, I caught a woman in the produce aisle, staring. She leaned to her friend, whispering something behind cupped hands. When I walked past, her eyes followed me, disgust and pity tangled together. Later, I found out from Sarah, my one cousin still speaking to me, that my parents had taken to calling me the betrayer at family gatherings. "They say you're trying to destroy them for money," Sarah said. "That you've always hated Camille. That you're using your illness to manipulate everyone." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was all so painfully familiar. "They have always needed a villain," I said. "They just finally made me official." Sarah paused. "I'm still with you. You're not alone." I needed to hear that more than I realized, because the day of the hearing was approaching fast. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every shadow on the wall dancing like an old memory. Camille pushing me down the stairs, my mother whispering, "Stop being dramatic," when I cried, my father's voice cold with disappointment. But I also saw other things. Greg brushing Luna's hair, Sarah laughing over wine at our kitchen island, Nathan signing his divorce papers with a shaking hand and a steady resolve. And that girl I used to be, small, bruised, waiting for love that never came. I sat up, crossed to the window. The moon was full, bright, whole, unashamed. In the courthouse lobby, I saw my parents for the first time in months. My father in a navy suit he didn't quite fill anymore, My mother in a pearl necklace I hadn't seen since Camille's graduation. She smiled at me like nothing had ever happened, like we were two women meeting for brunch. Camille wasn't there. Alicia leaned in. She's been removed from the plaintiff list. Looks like Nathan's divorce lawyer filed something last minute. The clinic's fraud investigation triggered too many red flags. So it was just them. Two people trying to weaponize shame one last time. The judge was a tall woman with gray streaks in her braid and reading glasses that slid low on her nose. She listened, took notes, asked questions. My parents made their case. Emotional distress, reputational harm, my online vendetta. When it was our turn, Alicia laid everything bare. Fact by fact, date by date, document by document. Then she played the voicemail. The courtroom was silent as Camille's voice filled the air bitter and unmistakable. By the end, the judge looked tired. Not annoyed, not angry, just tired. Tired. She rubbed her forehead and asked my parents one question. Do you understand the danger your daughter would have faced if she had agreed to what you asked? My father stared straight ahead. My mother's mouth open-closed, then opened again. She always exaggerated, she said quietly. Her heart, it's not that bad. Silence again. Then the judge leaned forward. I'm dismissing this suit with prejudice, she said. This is not a case of emotional damages. It's a case of emotional abuse. My parents stood frozen. The bailiff asked them to leave. They did. And for the first time in my life, I watched them walk away from me without taking anything. But as Greg and I stepped out into the courthouse steps, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line. Urgent medical inquiry. I opened it and nearly dropped my phone. It was from a private clinic in Arizona, the one Camille had secretly switched to. They had questions, because someone claiming to be me had just signed up for a surrogacy evaluation. I stared at the email until the words blurred. Someone claiming to be me had signed up for a surrogacy screening at a clinic in Arizona. They used my name, my birth date, my medical history well, most of it. Not the real details, of course. Just the cherry-picked ones carefully scrubbed of anything fatal. My chest tightened, not panic rage, a deep pulsing fury that started low in my spine and curled upward like smoke. I forwarded the message to Alicia, then called the clinic directly. A cheerful voice answered, "Thank you for calling Sunrise Fertility. How may I help?" "This is Jordan Whitaker," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone just impersonated me to initiate a surrogacy evaluation at your clinic. That application is fraudulent, and I need to speak to your legal department." The woman on the phone went quiet, then said, "Ma'am, can you verify your email and date of birth?" I did. 5 minutes later, I was on the line with the clinic's director of operations. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Whitaker," she said. "The person claimed to be you and presented what appeared to be valid documentation, including a notarized medical release. I didn't authorize anything I said. I've never even been to Arizona." The director sighed. "We suspected something was off when the documents showed inconsistencies in your cardiac records. They seemed edited again." "They're trying to do it again," I whispered. She asked if I wanted to file a formal fraud complaint. "Yes, immediately. And I want the application frozen. Nothing goes forward." She assured me it would be done. Then she asked something that made my stomach twist. "Would you like to know who accompanied the applicant?" I hesitated. "Yes." There was a man, mid-60s, white balding, answered to Ken, sounded like a father figure. My father. I felt the world tilt slightly beneath me. He had driven someone to Arizona, impersonating me, just to try again. Even after the lawsuit, even after the judge's words, they didn't stop. Greg came into the room as I ended the call. "What's going on?" I handed him the phone, let him read. By the end, his jaw was clenched so tightly I thought he might shatter his molars. "They're unhinged," he said. "They're going to keep coming." "Not if we expose them again," I said, this time publicly. We gathered everything: the email from the clinic, the phone call summary, the timeline. Alicia contacted the Arizona clinic's legal team and pushed for their internal investigation to go on record. But I did something else too. I reached out to Nathan, Camille's ex-husband. He hadn't spoken publicly since the divorce was finalized a month ago, but I still had his number. I texted him. They tried again. They went to a clinic in AZ pretending I signed consent. "I need to talk, please." 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Nathan's voice was calm, controlled. "Where do you want to meet?" We met at a coffee shop in a strip mall just outside the city. Neutral ground, public enough that neither of us could bolt or explode. He looked older, not aged, just heavier, like he'd been carrying things too long. "They forged again?" he asked. I nodded. "I had a feeling," he said. "Camille reached out to me last week, said she was considering options. I didn't think she'd go this far. She had help, I said. My dad was with her. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. I don't even know who that woman is anymore. You're not alone, I said. None of us ever really did. Then I told him something I hadn't told anyone else. I still have the voice memos, I said, from when Camille called and left threats. And I recorded the conversation with my mother last year, when she said my heart condition was exaggerated. Nathan blinked. You recorded her. She didn't know, I said, but I kept everything, just in case. He leaned forward. I'll testify. I froze. Nathan nodded. I'll testify. If this goes to court or the press, you have my support. Camille's behavior, their lies, the forged documents, it needs to stop. My breath caught. Why now? Because someone finally stood up to them. And I didn't when I should have, but I can now. That night, Greg and I drafted a formal legal complaint for reproductive fraud and medical impersonation. Alicia filed it in both states. But I wasn't done. I uploaded a post, a long one, not on Reddit, not anonymous. I used my name, my photo, my face. The caption read, "When your family wants your body more than your well-being, it's time to speak." I detailed everything, from the surrogacy proposal to the medical fraud to the most recent Arizona attempt. I named no clinics, but I laid out dates, facts, audio clips, evidence. The post went viral within 48 hours. Thousands of women commented. Some shared their own stories about coercion, forced caregiving, emotional blackmail under the mask of family. Others simply said thank you. I turned off notifications, let the waves wash past me. But then, something changed. A direct message from a former nurse. She used to work with one of Camille's fertility doctors, the same doctor who'd been quoted in earlier documents as having approved the surrogacy proposal. The message read, "I saw your post. You need to know Camille's team never had legal clearance. Your parents filed something, but it was red flagged. I think there's more they haven't told you." I asked to speak. She agreed. We set a time. And as I prepared to take the call, I had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole was about to go. The former nurse's voice crackled through the speakerphone. As I sat cross-legged on my bed, my heart racing in my chest. "I don't work there anymore," she said. "But I remember your name. Camille brought your file in herself." My stomach dropped. She physically handed it over. She did, with a man looked like her father. Said you were her surrogate and had given consent. I closed my eyes. That's how they got so far. In person. Confident. Smiling. Shameless. But here's the thing. The nurse continued the records were incomplete. Redacted in weird places. Some scans were clearly photoshopped badly, if I'm being honest. The clinic flagged the file and froze the application. Did anyone report it, I asked? She hesitated. Internally, yes. But it never went to law enforcement. Too much gray area. No one wanted the heat. I felt that cold, familiar fury again. The kind that makes your hands shake not from fear, but clarity. They had tried everything. My parents, Camille. They forged my records, lied to doctors, lied to me. They would have risked my life for a baby that wasn't even theirs to claim. And still, they were out there believing they had the moral high ground. That night, I wrote my final statement. Not for a judge, not for a lawyer, for me. And for every person who'd messaged me in the last week, people who whispered, "You told my story too." I posted a video. No filter, no script, just my voice raw and steady. I told them the whole truth. The forged records, the coercion, the silence that followed, the family that tried to break me, and the new one I built instead. Then I said this: if you've ever been told your worth depends on what you can give rather than who you are, I want you to know that's a lie. You are enough as you are. You do not owe your body. You do not owe your silence. You do not owe your forgiveness just because someone shares your blood. I didn't check the views. I didn't need to. 3 days later, I got a call from Alicia. "They're opening a federal case," she said, voice trembling with restrained excitement. "Medical fraud, identity theft, reproductive coercion." It was happening. The clinic in Arizona had submitted their internal documentation. Nathan had submitted a written affidavit about Camille and my parents' actions. Even the former nurse agreed to testify. My mother and Camille were subpoenaed. When the papers were served, Camille tried to blame everything on my dad, claimed she'd been misled. But the court wasn't interested in theater. They wanted facts. And the facts were damning. Forgery, conspiracy, reckless endangerment. By the time the case went public, I was already weeks into a quieter life. Greg and I had moved to a new neighborhood across town, not to hide, but to start fresh. Our son started at a local charter school that let him paint garden and ask impossible questions every day. I volunteered in his classroom once a week, something I never imagined myself doing when this journey began. One afternoon, as we were building a papier-mâché volcano in his science lab, he looked up at me and asked, "Mom, are we safe now?" I blinked back tears. "Yes, baby," I said, "we're safe." I wasn't sure if I believed it fully yet, but saying it aloud made it feel more real. Later that night, Greg made us dinner meatloaf and mashed potatoes, his comfort classic. We laughed over spilled gravy and homework complaints. Then, as I loaded the dishwasher, my phone buzzed. A message from Camille's ex-husband, Nathan. They pled guilty. Your dad took a deal. Camille got community service and lost custody of her embryos. She's not allowed to pursue fertility treatments in the state for 5 years. I stood still. Guilty. Not a full victory, but something close to justice. I read the message again and again. My hands didn't tremble. My breath stayed steady. That night I dreamed of younger me. Not the girl who was scared and bruised and always apologizing for existing, but a little girl running barefoot through a sunlit yard, laughing like she belonged in the world. Because now, she did. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I still hear their voices, still feel the echo of selfish, ungrateful, broken, but they no longer feel like the truth. They're just noise, fading. What stays is this: I am not a vessel. I am not a favor. I am not a spare part in someone else's fairy tale. I'm a woman, a mother, a survivor, and I finally know what freedom feels like. But just as I began to let go, something new arrived. A letter, not certified, not legal, just a plain envelope slipped into my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a photo, an old one, Camille and me, at a birthday party. I'm maybe 6, she's 10 with a paper crown. I'm holding the cake. On the back, in a handwriting I recognized too well, were 5 words: "You always wanted to win." No signature, no explanation, just that. And as I stared at the faded photo, a cold, uneasy chill crept down my spine. I thought the story was over, but maybe it wasn't. Story 2: I never thought I'd be standing on the porch of the house I ran from over a decade ago. And yet here I was, 13 years later, with my husband Greg by my side, our 6-year-old son Lucas in the back seat, asleep with a half-eaten granola bar still in his hand. We hadn't driven across 3 states for a reunion, a funeral, or some act of forgiveness. We were here because my parents had called out of the blue and said, "We need to talk. It's important." That alone should have been enough of a red flag, but I agreed anyway. When I say I wasn't close with my parents, I don't mean we just drifted apart. I mean that after I graduated from UC Santa Cruz and left Indiana behind, I never once looked back. No calls, no visits. Just a few obligatory Christmas cards exchanged through clenched teeth. The kind of silence that grows between people when one of them has survived and the others pretended she never existed. My husband Greg, bless his overprotective heart, was suspicious the moment I told him they'd reached out. After 13 years of silence, they want something. Nobody opens that door unless they've got a hidden agenda, he warned. I told him I'd be fine, that I was stronger now. But deep down, a small part of me still wanted to believe they had changed. Maybe they had finally realized how badly they'd hurt me. Spoiler, they hadn't. We pulled up to my parents' house around noon, a crisp fall breeze chasing leaves across the neatly trimmed lawn. The house looked exactly as I remembered, too symmetrical, too polished. A white picket prison with hydrangeas that never seemed to wilt. Greg cut the engine, gave my hand a squeeze, and said, "Say the word and we're out." I nodded, heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't afraid of them, not anymore. I was afraid of what they might still be capable of. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and judgment. My Linda Carter greeted us in her usual way, tight smile, cold eyes. "Maya, you look healthy," she said, as though that were a compliment. My father, Robert, barely glanced up from the envelope he was holding. "Let's sit," he said. No hug, no warmth. We followed them into the living room. That same awful floral couch. That same oil painting of Emily, my sister, still hanging above the mantel like she was some kind of saint. They handed me the envelope. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe some letter of apology or estate paperwork. But no, it was a legal packet. A surrogacy agreement. At first, I couldn't even process what I was looking at. Then I saw the names Emily Carter and Daniel Pierce typed neatly on the intended parents' line. My name listed as the gestational carrier. Doctors, lawyers, consent forms, everything filled out except my signature. "I don't understand," I said, voice tight. My mother leaned in, clasping her hands like she was about to pitch me a vacation timeshare. Emily's been struggling with fertility issues. Her doctor says this might be her last viable window, and you're the best match. Greg's face paled. You can't be serious. I stared at them, blinking slowly. I almost died giving birth to Lucas. I had an open heart surgery at 22. You know this. Mom waved a hand dismissively. Yes, but the new doctor Emily found says the risks are manageable with the right supervision. And besides, think of what this would mean to her. She's always dreamed of being a mother. And I've already been one, I said, my voice breaking. You want me to risk my life so she can check a box on some fantasy family vision board? You owe us, my father said flatly, like he was stating a math equation. After everything we sacrificed, I laughed. I actually laughed. What exactly did you sacrifice, Dad? You mean the medical bills my grandparents paid? The ones you never let me forget, even though they weren't your burden to begin with? Or was it the way you skipped my high school awards night because Emily had soccer practice? Greg stood up, jaw-clenched fists at his sides. This conversation is over, but my mother wasn't finished. Maya, she said suddenly tearful, this is your chance to finally be part of the family. Emily would do this for you if the roles were reversed. That was when I lost it. She shoved me down the stairs when I was 12, Mom, I snapped. Because I touched her science fair project. You said I should be more careful next time. She didn't even get a talking to. So, don't you dare come in here and rewrite history like she was my protector. The room fell silent. My father muttered, we didn't come here to argue. No, I said, standing up slowly. You came here to use me. Again. Like I'm some spare part. Some broken tool that only has value when it benefits Emily. Greg grabbed the envelope off the coffee table and ripped it in half. We're done here. I didn't cry until we got back in the car. Greg was fuming, gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles were white. They're insane. They actually expected you to risk your life again for the daughter they actually love. And the worst part? A part of me still wondered if maybe I was being selfish. It was a thought I had spent most of my life swallowing. What if I finally proved I had value by giving Emily what she couldn't have? What if this was the one thing I could do that would finally earn their love? But then I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Lucas sleeping in the back seat. My seat. My miracle. The reason I survived the delivery that almost killed me. And I remembered, I am not selfish for choosing to live. That night, I didn't return their calls. Over the next 3 days, I got texts from Emily. Family helps family. This was our last chance. If it were you, I would have said yes. All lies. Greg sat next to me on the couch as I scrolled through the messages. We need to block them, he said. They've crossed a line, Maya. I know, but part of me hesitated. Because somewhere deep inside, I still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd stop. That they'd come to their senses. That I wouldn't have to lose everyone I ever knew just to stay alive. Then at 2:13 a.m., I got a new message from an unknown number. You've always been a letdown, but this is a new low. Consider this your final act as part of this family. It was my father. I stared at the glowing screen pulse pounding in my ears, heart thudding, in that old familiar rhythm of panic. I didn't realize until Greg said it out loud. They're not just pushing Maya, they're preparing for something. And that's when I saw it. In the corner of the message attached quietly, as a PDF file, a scanned letterhead from a fertility clinic in Chicago. And my medical records. Or at least, something that looked like them. Greg stared at the attachment with narrowed eyes like it was a ticking bomb. I hadn't opened it yet. I didn't have to. Just seeing the clinic's logo, Northwestern Center for Reproductive Health, and the title Patient Medical Summary made my blood run cold. They didn't, I whispered. Greg took the phone gently from my hands, his voice steady but tight. They would. You said it yourself. Your parents don't see boundaries. They see barriers. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they had attached the wrong file. Maybe it was just a blank consent form. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But deep down I knew. They'd faked my medical records. I opened the PDF with shaking fingers. It was 3 pages long, cleanly formatted with my name, birthday, and even an outdated address from back when I lived in Santa Cruz. Page 2 listed my surgical history, but something was off. It excluded the most critical detail of all my congenital heart defect. Instead, it claimed I had no known cardiovascular issues and had experienced a normal first pregnancy with minor complications. That sentence alone was a grotesque lie. I had nearly died in the delivery room. I still had the jagged scar across my sternum and the defibrillator buried in my chest to prove it. They're going to try and force you, Greg said, jaw clenched. They're building a case. I couldn't breathe. My chest ached not from the defect but from something deeper. betrayal layered on betrayal, wrapped in a smile and served on official letterhead. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every memory I'd tried to bury, being told I was a burden, an accident, a mistake. Hearing my mother whisper to a friend at church that it was such a shame I wasn't as well adjusted as Emily. Watching my father beam at Emily's college graduation while I sat on the sidelines of my own. I thought I had escaped, but they'd found a new way to drag me back. The next morning I called my grandmother, my dad's mother, Joan. She was one of the few people who had ever treated me with decency, someone who had quietly slipped me 20s in high school, just because. Her voice trembled when I told her what had happened. I overheard them talking. She said, her voice low, like someone might be listening. Your parents are working with some attorney. I don't know the details, but they kept saying things like medical viability and family duty. I sat on the kitchen floor, phone pressed to my ear. They're trying to paint me as irrational, that I'm refusing for emotional reasons, not medical ones. Oh, honey, she breathed. They're going to try to disprove your doctors. And there it was. The twist that made my stomach lurch. They weren't just manipulating me. They were planning to erase the truth. If they could convince a judge or the public that I was just holding a grudge, that I was jealous of Emily, or trying to sabotage her happiness, they could discredit everything, including the very real risk of my death. I called my cardiologist's office immediately. They put extra security on my records and flagged any external access. Then I contacted 3 family law firms. The first 2 were sympathetic but vague. The third, a boutique firm specializing in reproductive rights, answered my call with clarity and fire. You're describing reproductive coercion, the lawyer said. And if they falsified medical documents, that's not just unethical, it's criminal. Her name was Denise Langford, and she spoke like a woman who'd fought battles like this before. She walked me through steps we needed to take: cease and desist letters, digital evidence collection, preparing a restraining order. Greg began screenshotting every text, every call log. We backed everything up twice. I deleted nothing. Lucas thankfully was too young to understand what was going on. But one afternoon, while I sat blankly on the couch, he climbed into my lap and asked, "Why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" I blinked, because sometimes even people who are supposed to love us, they don't listen when we say no. He considered this, brow furrowed, then nodded slowly. Like Tommy at school, he never stops, even when I say no. Exactly that. Out of the mouths of babes. And still it got worse. A week later, a new number popped up on my phone. I didn't answer, but the voicemail played on speaker as Greg and I sat at the kitchen table. It was my mother. "Maya," she began, tone smooth, rehearsed. "I know things have gotten a little heated, but Emily is devastated. Her last IVF attempt failed. The doctors say this really is her final opportunity. You can fix this. It doesn't have to be messy. Let's talk. Just us." The message ended with her pushing a fertility specialist's contact, one who she claimed was comfortable with cardiac cases, as if she were offering a used car with slightly bald tires and saying, "It's still good, just take it for a spin." I met her the next day. Public cafe, neutral ground. Greg parked outside the whole time just in case. She smiled like nothing had happened, sipping her latte as if we were discussing wedding colors. "Emily's heartbroken," she said. "You're her only hope." I said nothing, just stared. "She's always wanted to be a mother," my mother continued. "She's always been so maternal. You remember how she looked after you growing up?" That almost made me laugh. "She pushed me down the stairs," I said flatly, "when I was 12. I couldn't sit properly for 2 weeks. Mother waved a hand. "You two had your squabbles." "Squabbles," I repeated. "She bullied me, and you protected her." She leaned in then, eyes sharpening like a hawk's. "This family has always been about legacy. You've been so difficult, Maya, always resisting, always making it about you. This is your chance to do something right." And there it was, the truth. Not a request, not a conversation, a declaration. I wasn't a person to them. I was a resource, a last resort, a vessel. I pushed the business card she'd given me back across the table. "You'll never touch my body or my son's future with your lies." She didn't stop me as I walked out. But as I turned to glance back, I caught a glimpse of her face, hard, tight-lipped, seething not with sadness, but with rage, a fury that I had dared say no. That night, a new message arrived from my dad's phone. Short, chilling. "You've left us no choice." And that's when Grandma Joan called, voice shaking. "Maya," she whispered, "I think they're going to take legal action. They're trying to force you through the courts." Grandma Joan's voice echoed in my head long after the call ended. "They're going to take legal action. They're trying to force you through the courts." I sat frozen in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. Greg stood across from me, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke low and deliberate. "We need a lawyer, a real one, now." Within 48 hours, we were sitting in a sleek downtown office that smelled faintly of fresh carpet and expensive coffee. Denise Langford was already waiting, folders in hand, and a steel glint in her eye. "They can't make you carry a pregnancy. That would violate every reproductive autonomy law in this country," she began. But she paused, flipping open a folder. "If they're falsifying documents and using emotional coercion, we're in deeper than a civil dispute. This is criminal fraud." She explained what we were really dealing with, a pattern of harassment, manipulation, and now forgery. With each text, voicemail, and attempted meeting, my parents were establishing their own undoing. "They're trying to manufacture a case against your doctors," Denise said. "Not just you. If they can cast enough doubt, convince a judge you're withholding consent irrationally, they might file for some form of guardianship or emergency injunction." My stomach churned. "They're trying to say I'm unfit to make decisions about my own body." Denise nodded. "If they can twist it into a family dispute over medical rights, yes. I've seen it before. They won't win, but they can make your life hell while trying." Greg reached for my hand. "We fight back." And so we did. That week became a blur of paperwork, notarized letters, cease and desist orders, and digital backups. Denise moved fast. She knew what she was up against. Every email my parents had ever sent, every voicemail, every altered document, we organized it all like evidence in a war room. Meanwhile, the messages kept coming. From my mother, "Think about your sister, she needs you." From my father, "You owe this family more than silence." And from Emily, "You're just jealous. I've always known that." That one hit different, because for a fleeting second it wasn't entirely wrong. Not jealousy of her life, but of her freedom, of being wanted, celebrated, adored, of never having to earn love the way I had begged for scraps. But no amount of envy could justify their latest stunt. One morning, Denise called with an update, and her voice was sharp. "They tried to access your records again, this time from a clinic in Michigan. I've already reported it, but, Maya, they're not giving up." Lucas wandered into the kitchen at that moment, dragging his stuffed dinosaur by one arm. He looked up at me and said, "Mommy, can I have pancakes so casual, so pure?" And I nearly cried, because in that moment the truth burned bright. They weren't just attacking me, they were threatening him. My son, my heart. Greg and I took action. We locked down every digital account, froze our credit, set up security alerts. We even installed a camera outside the house. Every measure was a shield between my child and a family that had never protected me. Then something unexpected happened. A call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. Later I listened. It was Daniel, Emily's husband. His voice was quiet, tired, but clear. "I didn't know the full story until now. I'm sorry. I don't agree with what they're doing. I never have. They've shut me out of the process, but I don't want her to get hurt. And I definitely don't want you to get hurt." A new player had entered the board. Greg and I exchanged a look. "Maybe he can stop her," Greg said. I shook my head. "They've all gone too far." But I saved the voicemail anyway. Later that week, while Lucas was napping and Greg was working in the garage, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote the hardest email of my life. A mass email to every member of our extended family, the aunts, uncles, cousins, even the ones I hadn't seen since grade school. I attached a signed statement from my cardiologist outlining the severity of my condition. I included photos from my first pregnancy, hooked to machines swollen beyond recognition. And I wrote, "This is not drama. This is not about sibling rivalry. This is my life, and they are gambling with it. From this point forward, any attempt to contact me regarding surrogacy will be forwarded to my attorney. This is not up for discussion." I hit send, and then I blocked every number except Grandma Joan and, surprisingly, my cousin Sarah. Sarah called me the next night. "I remember how they treated you growing up," she said. "You don't owe them a damn thing." She offered to speak up at the next family gathering, to counter whatever story my parents had been spreading. Because yes, of course they had twisted it. By the end of that week, I started seeing cryptic Facebook posts from my aunts. Sometimes family means sacrifice. Some people forget who raised them. And the kicker from one of my uncles, "Not everyone who shares your blood is your family, but they still owe you." The flying monkeys had arrived, but I didn't flinch, not this time. Because I had one more ace left. My attorney had reached out to the reproductive clinic that appeared on the falsified forms, and the response stunned us. They had never approved a surrogacy agreement with someone like me. Not only that they were investigating the forged documents, what we suspected was no longer a theory. It was a full-blown medical fraud case. And then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. Greg walked in holding his phone. "It's Daniel," he said. "He's ready to talk." Daniel met us at a quiet park near the edge of town neutral ground, the type of place with peeling benches, too much gravel, and just enough tree cover to keep things private. Greg and I arrived first, sitting on a shaded bench near the walking path. I clutched a thermos of lukewarm coffee like it was armor. When Daniel finally showed up, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were rimmed red, his posture hunched, but he nodded to us with a quiet, sincere gravity. "I'm sorry it took this long," he said, sitting down beside us. "But I know everything now." Greg stayed silent, letting me lead. Daniel took a deep breath. "I saw the email you sent the family. I didn't believe what Emily was saying about you before, but I didn't know the whole picture either. Then I found the documents. The fake ones. The ones your parents and Emily gave to that clinic." My pulse kicked. "You saw them." He nodded. "Tucked in a manila folder in the home office. They had your signature, a forgery obviously, and a medical summary that left out everything about your heart condition." I confronted Emily. She didn't deny it. My breath caught. "What did she say?" "That it was your only chance to redeem yourself, to the family," he replied bitterly. "That you owed it to them. She said she'd convinced the specialist not to ask too many questions, that all they needed was my sign-off and yours. And if yours didn't come voluntarily..." He trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Greg's jaw tightened. They were going to force it through. Daniel looked down at his hands. "I knew your parents had issues, but I never thought she'd be capable of this. She's changed. Or maybe this is who she always was." There was a long silence between us, filled only by the breeze rustling through the trees and the distant creak of a playground swing. Then I asked the question I hadn't dared before. "Are you going in to testify?" He looked up. "If it comes to that, yes. I'll tell the court exactly what I saw. I've already emailed your lawyer copies of the forged documents. You're not alone in this." I swallowed the lump in my throat. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. Not triumph, this wasn't over, but a thread of truth finally pulling in our direction. Daniel hesitated before adding, "I've also started divorce proceedings." I blinked. "You're leaving Emily?" He nodded. This crossed a line. I can't be married to someone who would endanger another person's life, let alone her own sister's. I thought I married someone kind, someone driven, but this is something else entirely. It wasn't joy I felt then. It was vindication. The quiet kind that doesn't cheer but breathes. Over the next few days, the fallout was rapid. Denise filed a preliminary injunction with the court attaching Daniel's statement and the forged records as evidence. The clinic issued a formal complaint reporting the forgery attempt to the medical board. Emily's perfect image, glossy, curated the golden daughter, began to tarnish. Fast. Then came the family reunion. Of course we weren't invited, but my cousin Sarah was, and she made good on her word. She told the whole story. From our childhood where Emily had shoved me down the stairs and my parents blamed me, to the present where those same parents now wanted to erase my medical history to make Emily's dream come true. "They called me dramatic," Sarah told me later, until Daniel backed it all up. According to her, half the room went dead silent, the other half furious. Aunt Teresa, who had been sharing cryptic sacrifice memes for weeks, reportedly cried and left the gathering early. Uncle Marty, who once told me I'd grow up and understand family, loyalty, apologized via voicemail. But not everyone turned. My mother began calling everyone immediately after the reunion. She spun her own version that I had exaggerated everything, that Daniel was unstable, that I'd made the whole thing up out of bitterness. One of my cousins even messaged me directly. "I don't know what to believe, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive. Family isn't perfect." I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Then something surreal happened. The reproductive clinic, the very one my parents had tried to manipulate, sent a legal notice to my lawyer. In it, they stated that due to ethical violations and falsified documentation, both Emily and my parents had been permanently banned from using any affiliated fertility services. The fallout didn't stop there. Greg answered a call from an unknown number, his face going pale before handing me the phone. It was my father. "You've destroyed your sister," he said coldly. "She has nothing now. Are you satisfied?" I hung up without a word. Later that night, my grandmother called. Her voice trembled like it had been soaked in sadness. "I tried, sweetheart. I really did. But they won't stop. Your mother keeps insisting this isn't over." I looked at Greg, then at Lucas, who was drawing suns and rockets on the living room rug. "I need this to end," I told her. The next morning, Denise filed for a restraining order. We'd collected enough messages, calls, and threats. Enough false narratives. And then, a new twist. Daniel texted. "There's something else. Something I just found. You need to see it."